at its core, we know that One Health recognizes the intersection of animal, plant, human, and environmental health. And when we strengthen one, we strengthen them all. And nowhere is that more visible than here in Indiana. Our farmers, veterinarians, ag bioscience, and life sciences companies, researchers, and innovators are already showing how those connections come to life every day. From the soil that nourishes our crops, to the food that sustains our families, to the health of our pets and livestock, Indiana has an opportunity to build in a healthier, more resilient system for people, pets, farms, and farmers. This next conversation will explore how our universities, startups, industry leaders, and others are advancing that work, tackling challenges like antimicrobial resistance, zoonotic disease prevention, and sustainable food systems, all while innovation that improves both animal welfare and human health outcomes continue. To lead this discussion, please welcome our moderator, Dr. Aaron Schacht, CEO of Biomedit, along with a distinguished panel of experts who are shaping One Health solutions here and around the world. Dr. Sylvie Bruder, Director of the Center for Global Food Security at Purdue University. Dr. Mike Larimore, Distinguished Professor Emeritus, former Dean, UC Davis, Acting Executive Director of the North America One Health University Network. Christina Lopez, CEO and co-founder of PhytoCure, a company bringing precision medicine to veterinary oncology. And Jay Price, President and CEO of Mission Pet Health, who brings unique insight into how animal health innovation connects directly to public health and sustainable agriculture.
I was going to say suggest hold the applause until we finish, but thank you for the advance payment. First of all, great opportunity to be here. Thanks to Jeff and the team for hosting at their amazing headquarters, to Melina and Vince and Christy for the MC responsibilities. The organizing team has been amazing, and to my fellow panelists who all flew yesterday from another city to Indiana, except maybe Christina came in the day before, but we successfully navigated the terrors of a government shutdown and TSA challenges and weather and got them all here in time to be here. So an exciting start. Look, we just finished 2 sessions. David Adams gave us really sort of an eternal perspective about innovation, dating back to the Renaissance and his trip through Italy. And so he set a big picture inspiration for what's possible here, and spoke to the potential that this region has. I think with the other executives that we saw on the stage previously, they gave color and form to what we have, but also I think we all heard Dave Rick's admonition about realizing our full potential. We haven't done that. We've done that as individual entities, but not as an ecosystem. This panel will focus more on what it takes to do things in this space, or what things we could do in this space. But I think we want to try to harness that challenge from Dave and say, how do we let the rubber hit the clouds, so to speak, relative to this lofty ambition and potential and the realization of that potential in the form of economic development, talent development, business creation, value creation, ultimately for our end users and end consumers. So I'm excited to host this panel, and I want to get us started with each of us maybe talking about your perspective. How does the One Health topic land in the space that you operate? What's the meaning of it to you, and why do you think it's a path forward for at least some aspect of your strategy or your focus? Jay, you want to start?
Sure. No, thank you for having me. You know, the One Health initiative, I think if you just take a step back and look at a decades-old metaphor on the canary in the coal mine. So, you know, animals, pets inside our homes are a mirror for us. Like, a lot of people don't think about that and what that actually looks like, and so they are a true mirror. They're a sensor for biological changes. We share very similar biological pathways, and so just in general, in an overall succinctness, beneficial for pets is beneficial for humans, like the overlap there. Those two things, and to your point on the synergistic capabilities and the translational cycles that can accelerate just from the learnings on both sides, having all that brought together from a One Health dynamic is key to innovation and key to staying ahead of the curve on all the things that are going to be challenges that we're going to face going forward.
Thank you so much for having me here. My first time in Indiana. I feel so welcome. first of all. Second, One Health, it's front and central. Actually, the name of my company is One Health. We put most of the assets and branding behind PhytoCure, but so I've never been a place that actually talks about One Health like here, so I'm overjoyed. Essentially, I'm looking at cancer. I'm looking at cancer across species between humans and dogs. And while it's a vast unmet need for both species, I would say first starting with canines, there's been a big underserved, they're underserved right now in oncology. So first thing is we're lifting a lot of the R&D, the billions that have gone into human R&D and translating it back to the dog. And I say back because so many of the experiments were done in beagles. So that's kind of part one and squarely comparative oncology. The other aspect, as I say, both sides of the leash, is we're also helping human R&D. And in fact, and we can talk about it later, we already helped a human drug program go forward with canine data. So we are doing this, we're doing this every day, we're publishing prolifically, and more to come.
Yeah, thank you all. It's great to be here, and I'm amazed at this facility, so congratulations. Yeah, my One Health, to age me a little bit, goes back quite a long time when it was called One Medicine. And I was in a laboratory studying an obscure sheep virus, ovine progressive pneumonia. The veterinarians in the audience would know what that is. And my advisor came in with an electron micrograph of a virus particle and said, "What is that?" And we said, "Oh, that's from the sheep." He goes, "No, that's from the first AIDS patient in San Francisco." That was the moment where we discovered that the AIDS virus was a member of a family of viruses. And what did we know from that experience is that we had decades of information, decades knowing the tropism, decades knowing the immunological process of that. And flash forward as I obtained leadership positions, that One Health theme became really a motto. And when I was at UC Davis, when I got all of our faculty together and said, what's our impact, what's our mission? Because it was too long, it was over 3 pages. We distilled it down into advancing the health of animals, people, and the environment. And the vision was to lead veterinary medicine, which we did, but also importantly, and what you're going to hear is address societal needs. And I think that's One Health really where the rubber hits the road, addressing societal needs. So my perspective now is actually an advantage of looking at it from a North American perspective, including Canada and Mexico, so going beyond just one state, and that is a North American One Health University network. We're very interested in linking, just as in this region, and it's powerful to see in this region industry, government, and the academic institutions come together, so I look forward to talking about that.
I'm delighted to be here. I really appreciate the opportunity because, for among other reasons, my disciplines, crops, soils, agronomic sciences, ecology, are not, in my opinion, participating yet in the One Health agenda to the extent to which they could. I just returned from our professional meetings in Salt Lake City, and when I raised the possibility of having a One Health megaposium at our meetings next year, you might have thought I'd grown a horn. Everybody was sort of looking at me. And yet, the past 4 or 5 days, there have probably been 200 or more posters and talks on soil health, contaminants, emerging contaminants in the environment, the role of agriculture in distributing them, the role of agriculture in delivering improved feed for healthy animals, disease transmission, all kinds of things. So we are in that space, even if we are not yet fully in the game. And I look forward to trying to encourage our disciplines to engage more and to creating that opportunity for them to engage.
That's great. So you can see the tapestry of perspectives that we have to tap into this morning, and I'm looking forward to sort of inspiring some new questions. So Sylvia, stay with you. You self-declared outlier, right, in the One Health space. But let's talk about food security, food sustainability, something that I know your academic passion rests in. Give us the headlines. We heard Chuck Magro's compelling challenge about reliability of production of food, all of the challenges that we face. Talk about it through your lens and that impact on food as a source, right, of sustainment in animals and humans, but then the challenge with making that sustainable and healthy and affordable, I guess.
Yeah, healthy and affordable. Okay, all at once, and how long do you want me to talk? Certainly, food insecurity is a tremendous challenge, and health is not, of course, just the absence of disease. It's the ability to not only experience healthy environments and a healthy food supply, to maintain our health, but to have it to maintain our mental well-being as well. And the lack of certainty in your access to food is almost as much of a challenge as the real availability. If you are constantly anxious about food, you have a reduced quality of life. So there's a need to not only produce healthy food, but to ensure people understand that they can access it and that they will be able to access it. Ecosystems can be healthy naturally for humans, or they can be unhealthy naturally for humans. Some soils contain arsenic in a form that rice can take up, and then we can try and work around that so that we can grow rice that doesn't have unhealthful quantities of arsenic in it, especially for baby food and that kind of thing. But we also, as humans, make our environments unhealthy, and then we need to remediate those, and we need to be looking around the corner to understand what our future impacts are going to do to that food supply. I think I've digressed from what your question is, but you can
I think you gave nice
redirect.
color to it. I'm going to pivot and ask Michael to comment maybe on animal protein production and sort of what are the analogies, corollaries, and intersections with what
Yeah, I
Sylvie
think we
represented.
touched upon that, and I think you bring up some very good, important points that related to that. When it comes to animal production, obviously we're interested in sustainable agriculture. We're interested in having a product that is healthy. More and more, the consumer really wants to know that. Where is the product coming from? That was brought up this morning. I think one of the things that also we have to look at is what is the strength within the system. So I'll give you an example. In 2014, we had a case of an animal that went down right before it went into the slaughter plant, and it was diagnosed with BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, which is an acronym for mad cow disease. Well, the market shut down in Korea overnight. Literally, we had an economic problem. So getting back to One Health, how the economics leads into this. So what did we also have as an asset? We had a form of the National Animal Disease Laboratory System. So we had the diagnostic system that diagnosed it on a Thursday, and by Monday we were working with the USDA to do the traceback studies and the look-back studies, and we were able to convince by showing the data that it wasn't an animal entered into the food supply, so it did not contaminate the food supply. The markets opened up very quickly after that, and were stabilized. And at a meeting of the commodity groups about 3 weeks later, they were thanking us. But we were prepared, and what that tells you is that to be prepared, you have to have the systems. And here in Indiana, I think you have that. I think you have all of the components of that. Now, how do you work together to enhance that? And as were brought up this morning, to reach its full potential. And I think innovation entrepreneurship is a real part of that. And I learned at UC Davis that we weren't talking to each other. Medicine, I went around as a dean, talked to medicine, engineering, and what I really worked with was the Graduate School of Management, folks that were formerly at Apple. And we brought them together in an innovation entrepreneurship on a regular basis to get those faculty ideas to market. And it really was the magic when we got medicine, engineering, vet medicine all in one room, and the graduate students, by the way, all in one teams together, but mediated by business. And so, One Health is a transdisciplinary, approach. It means that we need to talk about social science. We need to talk about economics. We need to talk about all of the other disciplines and how do they come together. And that's going to be, I think, a challenge as well in this region.
It's a great segue. We have a biotech entrepreneur on the stage, so maybe pick up the topic there on what it means to try to pioneer a technology company in this space, and what are the opportunities and challenges associated with, both sides of the leash from your perspective.
Well, I think the first, let's say I'll start with the challenge, is actually the vernacular, like how to express what you do, because as Dean Larimore said, often these are totally siloed folks. So we're the total opposite. We're basically bursting those walls open. We're leading in AI. So I'm based in Silicon Valley, and we work, in our case, closely with Stanford. And what we're doing is creating the largest data set in the world, mapping the canine cancer journey from diagnosis to death, so longitudinally. And we can do that because there's no HIPAA if you're coming from the human side. So there's incredible advantages. There's a fast life cycle. And what we're doing there is then bringing in all the veterinary leadership in oncology. Then I'm bringing in the human leadership because we need to see where the puck is going and understand where it's coming from. And then we bring in the computer scientists. So what I've done is really assemble a multidisciplinary team. And what I want to underscore that's very fundamental is you need to build a lingua franca. You need to have a common language because each one of these silos are used to being the leader. The human medicine one, the veterinary oncology one, and then the computer science. And you really need to navigate. So a lot of my job is actually threading that through because you need it. And the beauty is that wedge, is that unseen wedge. Because if it was done before, there wouldn't be the opportunities. Does that make sense?
Sure. Wonderful. So Jay, just now take it now to the delivery of care in this emerging scene. And I maybe touch on two topics. One is, I think, the human-animal bond and the relevance, right? And the other is, where is veterinary care delivery headed from your perspective?
Yeah, I think Christina did a great job kind of outlining some of these things. We have inherent advantages in veterinary medicine because of the lack of regulatory overlay on the HIPAA side of it. And we have to be able to take advantage of that. So if you just take a step back and look just at genetic testing, if you surveyed a lot of just humans and people and saying, hey, are you willing to get genetically tested? They're going to say no. One, it's like, well, what's going to happen to that data? Two, I may or may not want to know what is really going on with me. And then the other part of it is, like, if you ask them, hey, can we genetically test your dog? They're like, oh, heck yeah, I want to know what kind of breed it is. It's like, well, that information is way more valuable to us than just knowing what the breed is. And back to a lot of the things that Christina was talking about is being able to leverage that information and inform technology advances that actually benefit both sides of the house. And so it has been very siloed. In the human health space, medicine is typically reactive as opposed to proactive. In veterinary medicine, it's way more of a proactive stance in how we do wellness testing, how we do lifelong monitoring of disease states in pets. But at the same token, on the flip side of it, on the human health side, medicine is much more targeted and personalized. We haven't gotten there yet on the veterinary side. So you can just imagine, like, both those cycles being combined together and accelerated together, you're going to get to a much better spot a whole lot quicker, and you're going to be able to deliver care at the inside a veterinary exam room in a much more personalized space. Wearable, same thing. We've done a great job on the human side. I have on an Apple Watch. And so we haven't gotten there yet on how we actually deliver the benefit of what that looks like, even on the microbiome side as well. So.
If I can just jump in on something that I think is important. So what we're doing is actually exactly that, working with about 1,000 vet clinics, delivering precision medicine, linking the data, the multimodal data. That's really important, and you can do it. And then from that, generating with AI the signal of what are the most promising interventions, the best drugs that don't add 30 days to a dog's life with cancer, but actually a whole second chance at life. And so we use AI for that, and now we're bringing the data set to the regulator and essentially developing a whole slew of assets, drugs.
It's amazing.
Yeah, let's build on this notion of the interconnection of all of these perspectives around preparedness, around some outbreak, some challenge, disease challenge, zoonotic in case, right? It starts maybe in the agriculture environment, ends up in a food-producing animal, ends up moving to humans. I mean, HPAI, for example, highly pathogenic avian influenza, now is present in chickens where it's, wild fowl where it started, moved to production chickens, has ended up in production dairy, and because of cats that drink the milk on the floor of the barn, it's moved to cats, and it's now in humans. So that's a good example of really the zoonotic challenge that I think everybody might have a comment about. We also know what we experienced with COVID and how we handled that, our response to that. What can we learn from our past experiences? I think the AIDS epidemic as well is food for thought. How do we respond in the future with that full One Health mindset, and how does that result in a better outcome than maybe what we've seen in the past? I just love anybody's thoughts on that.
Well, maybe I'll comment here because one of the things we had at UC Davis was the PREDICT program, which was funded by USAID. And one of the things we learned, it was in 34 countries, and they used common technology of really a PCR-based 26 pathogens, understanding which species they really wanted to target. And discovered over 800 new, either new viruses or new hosts to those viruses in that time span. And what that really tells you is the technologies that are important. How do we use that emerging technologies to diagnose faster, quicker, better, but also the knowledge of the disciplines of where are those zoonotic pathogens. And as you mentioned, we pick up the newspaper every single day and we see from botulism to other pathogens like avian influenza, the outcome of that to society. So society is demanding that we come up with these, and so that's going to drive it. I was at a meeting at the National Academy of Medicine in which we were talking about how do we do a better job of learning about where those transmissions are taking place. And what I was amazed at is the technology for sampling air. Not having to go in and sampling each individual in a wild animal market, but using technology to sample the air outside of the market and being predictive, and they verified that by going in and testing the animals. So those are the kind of breakthroughs in companies that we're really looking for. How do we do sampling better so we can sample the environment for pathogens, for things like microplastics, you know, things that are going to hurt the public's health. And I think there's a tremendous opportunity in that space.
So let me hop in here and get a little sort of smug comment in, and then I will modify that. But from my perspective, this is why the transmissions of diseases, the increase and decrease in virulence, et cetera, sort of classic ecological theory, which is why everybody needs an ecologist on their team. That said, we ecologists often prefer to sit and do I don't even know what day we don't play football, but whatever that day is.
Friday, I think.
Friday. Quarterbacking, where we sit on the sidelines and said, yeah, you should have seen this coming, rather than being much more participatory in the challenges up front as solutions are designed. And that's a bit on us for not offering our perspective, or perhaps even insisting that we take a look at the larger scale around the problem and think about where an engineered solution fits and what might be the unintended consequences, synergies, trade-offs, et cetera.
Any other comments from the?
I mean, I think for us, our moonshot is not even, you know, it's obviously transforming cancer in dogs, helping on the human journey, which we'll talk about in a moment. But actually the ultimate moonshot, and I don't want to be morbid, but I worked in the largest defense fund in the world. And one of the moonshots that I think about is how the pet dog is next to us in our home, right? So should there be, and not that there would be, because we're talking about it, a biowarfare, right? And think COVID, and on our board we have the deputy commissioner of the FDA in Trump 1 who had to handle COVID. And essentially, the United States was very good at identifying patients, but was not very good at then delivering care at that last mile of care. In the veterinary world, again, right, we enroll pet dogs in Alaska, Miami on the same day, and we're able to bring precision medicine alongside the clinicians, and we're able to get the data out. That is not a small thing. So you can imagine in a world where you have to get data very quickly, because in COVID, what happened is a lot of the United States policy happened from a small data set from Israel, which is a different population. So anyways, you can see how our pet dogs could really be our saviors.
Jay, your experience during the pandemic, and we know what it meant for pet ownership and the increase, but what did you worry about with a rapid adoption of pets and zoonotic threats and those kinds of things? How do you think about that in your business?
Yeah, I mean, it's. I'll never forget when a news article came out and it was over in Asia. It was like, oh well, there was a small Maltese at that point in time that they thought they had COVID, and so then it was a oh, you know what moment for everybody. It was like, well, how is this really going to spread? How is this going to proliferate? And we need to be thinking about that in every facet of it. And so even on the regulatory side at the state level, so much of veterinary medicine is regulated at the state level. And how do we actually think about doing that? And so having states interconnected as they think, because any small decision in the state when it comes to changes in regulatory environment, especially, they don't think how much it applies not only from pets, but outside the four walls of a home with a pet and outside an exam room. And making decisions for pets on that has a much broader cascading and far-reaching effect than a lot of people even imagine and think about. And a lot of it was discussed by Sylvia as well. And so it was definitely trying times, but even today, where everybody is going to continue to be on edge because we're all going to have PTSD from what happened on the COVID dynamic. And so how can we do a better job of interlinking data, communicating faster, and doing all those things?
Great. So 8 minutes left for the panel, and then we'll have some Q&A time. What I want to do is one final commentary from each of the panelists around this notion. You've heard about the vision for the One Health Innovation District here in Indiana. You've offered insights into what it means to try to live in this space and operate and cooperate with a systems perspective. What advice do you have, or what ambition or ideas do you have about what this One Health Innovation District ought to embody? What might we see from your perspective? What would you like to see? What challenge do you want to give about how we bring this to life?
Yeah, speaking from our side of it, you know, we have 17 veterinary practices here in the state of Indiana. We will have a couple more here in the next 6 months because we're doing a couple of startups. And as we just think about how we can be the nexus of, when you talk about One Health, a lot of it has been discussed here on the stage, but we haven't put all those, you know, I have 2 little boys, they love Legos. We haven't put all those Lego blocks together in a succinct fashion to truly build something to where all the interconnectivity, all the different data points, all the loops, all the emerging technology is located in one center. It's a unique opportunity that we have here in Indianapolis, and we're super excited about the potential and opportunity to actually put a living veterinary hospital that has patients that come from the population into that hospital on a consistent basis, so we can see all those things come to life. We can see the application of emerging technologies, and not only how the emerging technology helps pets, but also what it translates on the human side of it as well. And so there's no other place that I've seen that has the opportunity and the uniqueness that this opportunity has, and we're looking really excited about the opportunity to do that, just to be so much closer to the technology and the innovation from the exam room perspective.
I think for where I sit, I think you guys are already to some extent really doing it, because I'm learning personally a lot from Eli Lilly, who's the biggest LP and my biggest backer. And so, but, you know, I have to go elsewhere. Like here, Eli Lilly's here. And there's just so much to learn when you look at Eli Lilly versus Novo Nordisk. Like, it's just incredible. Not just the GLP-1, but the patient direct. It's a revolution. I think there's no turning back. And you guys have that here. And then being here in Elanco, which is so gorgeous. And, you know, I've been so welcomed. So it's already kind of really happening, the One Health, right? You probably have to have more connective tissue. And let me give you an example, a live example of how this could all manifest. On our end, we worked with the biopharma ASI. I was in Boston, but think about how Elanco, startups, universities could work with Lilly. We interrogated an ASI drug for humans, breast cancer approved. The drug came from sea sponge in North Japan, so the environment. And we wanted to interrogate in sarcomas, and there were no good animal models. So we came in and brought in canine data, and it was predictive. The drug is in phase 2 at Mass General, which means patients with that sarcoma, human patients, can already access. So meaning this is already happening. Imagine, right, Elanco, your clinic here, and the academic environment connecting with Lilly and Loxo and thinking, how can we speed up this translational One Health drug process?
Yeah, you know, and thinking about, as we talked about this morning, and the power within this region, it ties back into the quadpartite agreement with WHO, and one of their main platforms is workforce development of the future in One Health. And I think that's something to really think about, because you're doing that. I mean, you have incredible academic institutions. Just to give you an example of how that may change, a plant pathologist came to us and knew that we were taking examples from the field and teaching it in a One Health fashion from all over the world, and said, we are actually doing this in agriculture. Can we join together? And we created a One Health undergraduate major, but we didn't call it One Health. Well, we called it as Global Disease Biology. Well, guess what? Within 1 year, it was the second prescribed undergraduate major at UC Davis, and that's a very good agriculture school. And so what that tells you is that the young scientists, the young people, are voting with their feet. They're going towards to solve a societal issue. And that undergraduate major is flourishing today. So they don't want to be siloed. They want to solve a societal issue. I think the magic could happen here with Indiana, Purdue, and all of the other institutions combined with the industry to think about how you educate the future workforce as well.
I guess I get the last word. I don't know. So I want to go on the record saying that during COVID, I gave up many things, but I never gave up kissing my dog. So always kissed my dog, even though those threats were out there. Look, here in Indiana, we are in the midst of one of the most, if not the most, highly productive agroecosystems in the world. But we have a global food system, and we need to learn how, or we need to make sure that we collaborate within or adjacent to competition to make sure that we can grow the food that we need, the healthy and nutritious food we need, where it grows most efficiently, and then make sure it is delivered where it is needed to be, and in a respectful way in terms of people's culture and their relationship with food. That said, I am a firm believer we have all the pieces here in Indiana. We may lack a little bit, I like that term, connective tissue. We may need to strengthen our connective tissues and be very, very intentional about that piece. But we have the pieces. We have a history of moving innovation to the private sector. As a land-grant institution, that is part of our heritage, to innovate and then let the experts do the entrepreneurial effort of adapting technology so that it will be adopted. Academics don't do that very well. So we have the pieces, and it's a little bit shame on us if we don't take off.
Great. So we're down to 1 minute left in the presentation side of this, or the panel side of this. We'll go ahead and start early on questions. So we're going to open it up to any questions from the audience. It always seems like it's taking longer than it does, so we'll just sit here. Rob Riednauer.
One of the things that struck me when I thought of One Health and thought across that is the whole idea of emotional health. So can you speak to how these intersect in emotional health?
Yeah, one thing that Jay is and is very familiar with is the human-animal bond. And the human-animal bond is real, can be measured, and is effective in multiple different ways. And I think we see that in our society. I mean, our pets are no longer pets, but they're really treated as children. And the human-animal bond is real in that sense. Kissing your dog during COVID, I wouldn't recommend that as a virologist.
Yeah, it's an old wives' tale. Anybody heard? It's like your dog's mouth is cleaner than yours. It is not, I promise you.
But the human-animal bond is across all animals, you know, and people want to know about animal welfare. We have a whole animal welfare movement in veterinary medicine about how do we treat even our agriculturally important species in in a fair and conductive way, and productive way. So I think when we go from treating veterans with PTSD to the normal human-animal bond, I think that's real and very effective. That's part of that emotional response. But we need the psychologist. We need to measure that. We need ways to innovatively understand how is that affecting the physiology and how are the positive outcomes of that as well.
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to how, I think it's a great description of the human-animal bond, but especially from a mental health perspective and emotional perspective, there's a ton of white papers these days about how pets in the household actually lower your blood pressure, increase happiness inside the household, but there's also the inverse of that as well. And so if you just take a step back, we actually project on our pets too. I can't tell you the number of times I've been in exam rooms and you see, a dog or with a separation anxiety, highly anxious. You can look at their owner and understand that that owner is embodying a lot of that and projecting it on the pet, and the pet adapts to that as well. And so it goes both ways. I mean, it's bidirectional, not only on the disease side of it, but also on the emotional and mental side of it as well. And so how do we, understand our influence on the pet in the household just by our behaviors? There's 50% of the pet population that's obese. There's all of those things that go on, and just the environmental factors we're so much responsible for pet owners that we project on pets and vice versa.
So if we look at that, just to follow up on that, the innovation side of that, there's companies being formed, Pet Allies comes to mind, where they are using artificial intelligence and behaviorists to verify that data, to be able to have telehealth conferences with behaviorists to solve pet problems that we see. And we don't have enough behaviorists. I'm in the Veterinary Specialist Organization Committee. We don't have enough veterinary behaviorists to really answer all the questions the public needs. So that's an opportunity in that space.
I think I'll add a little comment on the idea of our emotional well-being and food. We often talk about remedying various problems associated with food by having food or nutritional prescriptions. But food is happiness, food is community. And so when we approach food and what to do about insecurity, we also need to think about that mental health aspect of food within our own cultures and not project an overly medicinal approach to food.
Jay, I would be interested just a little bit. A lot of news on the vet clinic. So, hey, visits are down, the share of wallet and the spend challenges, turnover on vets. What's the state of the, American vet clinic now? And look forward, you're a visionary. What's the next 5 to 10 years? How do we get into a sustainable path forward for vet medicine?
Yeah, I think it goes back to some of the stuff that was commented on earlier. We're chronically have issues on making near-term decisions to solve what we perceive as a near-term problem and not looking at the whole picture. And so, I think what I will say is it's vastly overblown when you hear people talk about, hey, there's a shortage of veterinarians. Well, I can tell you right now, there's not a shortage of veterinarians in Indianapolis. There's not a shortage of veterinarians in Birmingham, Alabama, and a lot of the major MSAs. Are there shortages of veterinarians in very key disciplines across the spectrum? Large animal medicine, food animal medicine, shelters, behaviorists, things of that nature. There absolutely is. And so now that we're getting into, so the response has been, hey, we need to build more vet schools. And that is being done right now, but it's been in a reaction to what has been perceived as a problem. And what happens with that, so, hey, they're going to open more vet schools. They're going to do a little bit different from an educational perspective, and it's going to be pushed out into the general practice to educate these vet students. But all these students are going to do when they graduate is they're just going to go into the major MSAs. And so instead of building more vet schools, how do we incentivize these students that are graduating to go back into rural communities, go back into different disciplinaries of veterinary medicine in order to provide the supports that's needed? Because all we're going to do is just overwhelm the system on GP veterinarians. From a macroeconomic perspective on what you've seen, I think it's a couple of different factors that are going on right now from the, what's being perceived as the clinical visits contracting. Clinical visits inside our hospitals are actually up, and they continue to be up, in large part because we're trying to figure out ways in order to bring care that is not into certain aspects. So when you talk about behavior, telemedicine is a phenomenal tool. You have behaviorists all over the country that just aren't in certain areas. And so how do you get that knowledge into the areas that aren't? And telemedicine is a great way to link that. And so you saw the average age of pets get a lot younger inside veterinary practices during COVID. And now what we're seeing is that effect is like, as a new pet owner, or as first time you get a pet, that first year of ownership, you're in the vet way more often. You can kind of correlate it to being a first-time pet, first-time parent. You're in the pediatrician a lot more. Your kid sneezes, got a cold. You don't know what's going on. You're going to take your pet in there just like you took your kid in there. As the pet gets a little bit older, year 1, year 2, that starts to dip. And that's where we are. COVID was 5 years ago. These pets are 5, coming on 6 years now. And we're going to start seeing the acceleration of a lot of disease processes here over the coming decade and really the next 5 years. And so what's going to happen with that is you're going to see more visits start coming back into the hospitals as those pets age. You're going to see higher acuity and needs for those pets. And my concern is in the near term a little bit, if we don't have the technology and we don't have the discipline and all the interconnectivities, we may get overwhelmed again for a brief period of time. And so we've got to be able to do that. The cost of care is an issue. So how do we innovate in ways that are going to lower the cost of care in order to be able to allow pet ownership to not be, perceived as such a luxury at this point in time. Inside the GP, it is still very, very affordable. The median spend of the average owner inside our hospital is less than $700 a year. Oh, by the way, people spend $700 million a year collectively on pet Halloween costumes. That's a fact. You can look that up. You can look that up. They don't wear it and they throw it away. So you talk about wastefulness. Well, that's wasteful. Like apply that to your vet bill and you'll be in a whole hell of a lot better spot.
You need to introduce a line of Halloween costumes that cause a rash, and then you'll be good.
That's a great idea.
We got time for one last serious question. So if there's anybody who has something else they'd like to surface, we got time for one more.
I have a question. I think, Sylvia, I work a lot in the agronomy world, and so very familiar with the conference you were just at, as I knew many people that were there. How is it people relate to pets easier sometimes than we relate to ourselves? I saw lots of economic reports in the pet food world that they wouldn't decrease the amount of money they were spending on their pets' food, but they would decrease the amount of money they were spending on their own food. How do we, and maybe it's using pets, but how do we bring the plant, the agronomy world into this One Health world better? And is it because they can relate more to pets than themselves and their own health? How do we bridge that gap? How do we bring that more together?
I think I could go a lot of different ways, and maybe others have thoughts on this question too. But I think there is much more appreciation in very recent months for soil health, for the role that the agronomic sciences play at the start of that food supply chain, and also a little bit at the root of some of the environmental issues that we're dealing with. And people want to have healthy food, whether it's for themselves or for their pets. And perhaps it's via their pets, they'll gain an appreciation of the need for healthier food. You've got the farmer's dog, you've got all these things out there. Well, when I look at some of those ads, I think, shoot, we should just get that stuff and eat it for dinner. And we'd probably be better off. But I think, I'm not sure I have a good answer other than I think our sciences are working on flexing their voice a bit more in terms of their role, whether it's for animals or humans directly or indirectly. And we actually had a conversation about the need for that amongst collaborators and leadership of the tri-societies.
I could maybe add something that from the oncology, the pet oncology side, I get asked all the time, is it the kibble? And my answer is always, cancer is very multifactorial. Nutrition does matter, but in pet dogs, the genetics, the inbreeding is like the number one factor, and then obviously the food. So that's kind of a point one to relate here. And then I think point two, back to what you were saying, Jay, about spend, to the question, Farmer's Dog just clocked $1 billion in revenue. It's not an old company, and it's because people want to buy pet health food. So one feedback, as you guys envision more deeply One Health here, is don't be unambitious. Go more ambitious. This concept that people don't spend, how many iPhones in this audience? I mean, yeah, I'm from Brazil, and there's really capital constraint, and even then they spend a lot. I think #1 cosmetics spent in the world, and so there's just a lot of it is the delivery of care or the delivery of the service, and that's where I think again lots to learn from Lily, and from a farmer's dog who's crushing it really, and how it's incredible.
Yeah, great. Maybe just to recap, I think a better understanding of how food contributes to health and a better understanding of where our food comes from, I think are good One Health challenges for us to take on. So we'll wrap it there. I want to thank my colleagues here on the stage for their brilliant insights and great commentary, and also thank, again, the organizers and the hosts for really a great session today. Thank you.